All right, and we're live. Welcome, everyone, to Peptides and Age Management with Dr. Kris Wusterhausen of the Resurge Clinic. Dr. Kris, welcome.
Good afternoon, Steve. Hope all is well.
All's well. Hey, so this is fun. A lot of things are going on, and the people that are listening to this show or these conversations are intended to provide educational um, material for you to think about and consider, because the folks that listen to this are ones that are wanting to take control of their health and to increase their health span, their energy, the things that we like to maybe implement and just have a better quality of life. There's all this topics out here for doctors on the topics that you're a specialist in, and then there's the biohacking community or the meathead community. They're always doing things ahead of the curve. And now you have an audience like me that are folks that are realizing that they're a certain age, things don't work like they used to. And so we're starting to investigate to see what it is that maybe we don't know about that we can implement and improve the way we feel, the way we move, have less soreness, etc. So that's what I'm really excited about, these conversations with you, Dr. Kris, and I'm I just get so much out of this. Today our topic is aging, your brain, and peptides. So talk to us first. As we get older, we're dealing with a little brain fog. We're dealing with, maybe we don't feel as sharp as we used to, and the things that I know about are things that are a little bit controversial, like maybe you want to get on AHDH drugs or whatever those drugs are that are supposed to help you focus a little bit more.
ADHD.
Yeah, and so those things really have side effects, and they're stuff that they're expensive too. And I don't know if my doctor would want to prescribe that or not. What are some other things that we can consider that can help us think better, feel better, have more clarity, etc.?
Yeah, so the brain is always a big topic of discussion with my new patients. It's quite rare that some percentage of their complaints all relate back to brain function. So many of my patients in their early 40s, maybe even late 30s, upper 40s, they believe they've developed ADHD, that inability to focus, that, not feeling like they can handle as many tasks in one day as they used to could. And, we start with all the simple stuff. Hormonal balance is, I always go back to it, but you need to turn that rock over and make sure that, that hormonal balance is achieved. In my opinion, you can certainly use the peptides first, but I feel very strongly that we need to have hormonal balance, kind of the foundation of the house. We need to pour concrete, make sure it's good before we start worrying about the walls and the roof. Believe it or not, nutrition, exercise, those are always really important. I think there's no doubt that anyone that's gone from not exercising to exercising, especially with hormonal balance, feels their more mental clarity. I've talked about it before. I'm a big fan of the ketone esters. One of the big side effects, good side effects of ketone esters is increased mental clarity. Basically, a lot of the patients I deal with kind of have that, and I think I have it some myself. I bet you can relate, is a little bit of that executive stress sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're just getting busier, and as technology improves, that just connects us more and more, and we simply can't ever turn it off. I think our brains are overused. 15 years ago, we weren't connected like we are now between our laptop. Heck, some people got multiple monitors in front of them and their phone, and just everything is just constant. It's nonstop. I have this really bad habit that I feel this need to, respond to every text, every email immediately. And sometimes I wish I was more like my wife that can just let it sit there. But so many people are like that. And as these tasks start to pile up, we start to think, my gosh, I'm ADHD. And it's really a combination of aging, too much is on our plate, peptides starting to decrease, hormones starting to decrease. So it's a complex, it's obvious, a very complex discussion. But I like to start with the foundation of diet, exercise, and hormones. And then from there, there's a multitude of different ways that we can go after that.
So help me understand. I'm not quite clear on what happens as your brain ages. We're all familiar with how we kind of worry because we can't remember a certain word, and we're wondering, are we getting dementia? There's all these fears that you have, but what's going on with our brain? Why?
Well, ultimately, our brain is atrophying, just like, atrophy is, decreasing in size, just like if you don't work out, your bicep atrophies, or if you have an injury to, you get a biceps tendon tear, if you don't have it repaired, and if you don't continue to exercise, your muscle basically weakens. And that's the same way with the brain. That's why now most of us have not being able to remember where you sat your keys. That's called being too busy and just not thinking about it when you throw them down. That's not typically any real sign of memory loss. We all fear that, or having a word escape you, like, oh my gosh, I could always remember that. Well, that's usually not so much of a sign of memory loss. But so many of us, a lot of what my other patients have is a family member, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister that's older that has dementia. And that obviously intensifies, your quest to make sure you don't go down that same path, because I think dementia, because Lord knows I've treated it a lot in my practice, is maybe one of the worst things you could get. I mean, if you could only imagine at some point in your life, you won't recognize your loved ones. You won't even know your date of birth. Your child can walk in a room and you have no clue who that person is. Obviously, it's not as tough on us if we're the person with dementia because we don't realize it. But wow, what a horrible thing for your family members to go through, because you basically watch your loved one leave, but their body stay behind, sometimes for a decade. And so, it's unfortunately we have not figured out the whole puzzle yet, but we're starting to unravel some of this stuff. And basically neurons and synapses and things of that nature just, they don't function quite as well as they used to. I mean, and unfortunately the brain's just like the rest of our body. As we start to age, cell senescence, as I always talk about it, you start to get just more disease, and things can happen. And especially if you then have on top of that a true neurologic disease such as multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, some form of dementia, most common one that we know about is Alzheimer's, then those just, amplify the problems. So
I was listening to a program, and it's interesting to me that there's such a connection with your gut health and your brain health. They seem so far away, but yet your gut health really impacts your brain health. Educate us a little bit on why that is.
Well, so it's funny you say that. I was just listening to a podcast this morning, and it was actually Dr. Seed's podcast. He put one out this week. It was a short one, but it's a really good one. I of course, I want you to listen to my podcast too, but I'm a really big fan of Dr. Seed's podcast. And he did one this week on autism. And, autism is a extremely rapidly growing disease in America. I actually sat in a lecture, I want to say about 2 years ago. There was a geneticist there, and God, I hope this geneticist is wrong. And he had said that the stats are rising so fast that they believe that by, I believe it was 2035, that 1 of every 2 births in America will be autistic. That's how rapidly rising autism is right now. And Dr. Seed's point today was when I was listening with autism patients, is to really go after the gut, really treat these patients, autistic patients with the gut. It all goes back to the immune system. 80% of our immune system is from the gut. And, especially in an autistic child or person, a lot of times communication is an issue, and they can't really let you know what they're feeling at all times. And it's just poor gut health affects everything, but it really dampens the immune system and really doesn't allow the body to heal itself, causes inflammation to go up. Excuse me, put you in an oxidative state. That's why the gut health is so important.
So we talk about cell senescence, and that's basically just, staying in the layman's terms where I can follow along. But cell senescence means that your cells are struggling or just to really either fix themselves or off themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, basically, we the term that you've heard me say is zombie cell. It's the living dead. It's a cell that should be dead, but it's still alive. It's malfunctioning. It's not doing its proper job. And we have some moments there where we can, hopefully, with some of these alterations that we talk about in these podcasts, cut down on cell senescence. But once a cell completely locks in on cell senescence, we don't believe you can reverse that. So you have this moment in time to try to reverse the cell senescence. And in the lower count of senescent cells you have in your body, it's my belief the better chance you have of healthy living and quality of life.
So the things that impact cell senescence or improving that or avoiding it, when I think about you, when you're talking to me, is that if our body is busy producing insulin, it's not cleaning house. And when your body has time to clean house, that's when it's able to handle these zombie cells or prevent these zombie cells. Wrong?
No, I think that's right. The way I look at it is I take it just back to basic science, which is we want to go back to the cellular level. Everything in our body is made up of cells. We basically want cells to communicate properly. We want them to be doing their function that they're meant to be in a perfect state. Our cells have lots of defense mechanisms, and we're glad they're there, but we want to keep that to a minimum if we can, because that allows it to do its proper job, which is depending on whatever part of the cell we're talking about. Producing energy per se is probably the most important thing they do, keep us alive, ATP. And so it's really no different than anything else in life. We want, if it's a person, if it's a cell, we want them doing their job, doing it properly, not getting distracted by other things out there so that they can do it more properly. So
let's talk about, obviously, there's the diet and the exercise and the hormones, okay? The things that a lot of us are going, okay, we've heard that a lot and we don't follow it that much. Well, maybe, right? But you've helped me understand intermittent fasting, and just a real quick review on intermittent fasting and how it can start to help you with the cellular level.
I like to just give a definition of what I think intermittent fasting is, because I was actually watching some videos on ketoneaid.com, and he made some good points, because fasting to every person can be a different definition. So intermittent fasting to me is 16 continuous hours. The only thing that we can intake during those 16 hours is water, black coffee, or unsweet tea. No artificial sweeteners, no calories, just those three liquids. I try to tell my patients to do it at least 3 times a week, prefer 5 times a week. You could do it 7 days a week. I try to do it Monday through Friday. What we're trying to do there is we're trying to optimize our body's use of keeping insulin levels low, because if you don't have any calorie intake for 16 continuous hours, that's going to allow your insulin levels to fall down to its lowest levels of the day and stay there for an extended period of time, which then helps the body, especially growth hormone, get a better metabolic effect, so that you're using fat cells for storage, because our body does not want to use fat cells for storage. I know tons of people that go to the gym, they work their little tushies off, they eat pretty well, but they never lose any fat cells. And you have to somewhat I like that term, biohack the system into making your body use fat for fuel. Once it starts to do it, then it realizes it's okay, and you can start to really get some progress with those fat cells being reduced. But in addition to that, it decreases, you always hear me about decreasing inflammation in the body. It makes you more mentally clear. It just makes you feel better. My patients who fast and do it routinely, yes, the first couple weeks can be rough. After you kind of get through some of those, ketone-like flus and things like that, even though we're not really doing full ketosis, but you can feel bad. It's a little bit of a detox situation there. You start to feel tremendously better in the long run.
So one of the things that really started to make a lot of sense to me and helped me get past all the reasons why I can't go without eating for 16 hours, which once I started doing it, it's not that hard, especially
piece of cake, right?
Yeah, well, if you put a big sleep period in between there, then it's not that big a deal. But But the thing that started making sense, everybody go, all right, you're going to burn fat, you're going to lose some fat. But when you talk about how it impacts your growth hormones and what that's doing to your brain and your clarity, that was even more important to me than burning some fat. That's like, I don't know. For some reason, it feels like, I don't know if it'll burn my fat, right? But once you kind of convinced me about how important the growth hormone is, and when that really gets to be active and effective, it's during this intermittent fasting. But so coach us on what it's doing to your brain in particular when your growth hormone is active.
Well, most of these things kind of go down the same pathway. It's just clearing that mental fog. Most of my patients, and I've had this issue myself, is that mental fog. You just felt like you're stuck in a rut. And as your growth hormone levels come up and get higher, and we all, from past discussions, we'll also use growth hormone secretagogues at times to get growth hormone levels even higher. Improve sleep. First of all, growth hormone actually helps you sleep better, but it also then soothes the brain, basically. So your brain starts to function better, better mental clarity, just overall multitasking better. And so it just improves the function overall of the synapses and how your brain works and functions and does.
Well, let's talk about some peptides that one could start to consider or talk to their doctor about. And the first one that I was kind of blown away about is the BPC 157. And again, that's where I was like watching some videos about it and learning what it does to your gut. But more importantly, I noticed in there was like brain function. And I'm going, why?
Yeah, so I don't know that we completely understand everything about how every single peptide works, but it does. BPC 157, as we've talked about, has gone over the counter. We're actually able to, you don't even have to see a physician now to get it. You just have to you just have to know how to get it. But that's been a really big improvement. And BPC, I use it in about 4 different areas. Gut health, so irritable bowel, inflammatory bowel, reflux. I love it in that spot. I love it for chronic musculoskeletal problems. My patient that I told you about that had sciatica referred her dad over, who has chronic osteoarthritis in his hands, and I've already got a report back after 4 or 5 doses. His arthritic pain has decreased tremendously in his hands simply from taking BPC oral. But then also the brain function. I think you and I, maybe off the record, have talked about a patient that I was involved with, a physician's mom who was in her upper 80s and had rapid onset dementia. And with BPC and some other things that we did with her, we were able to get her oriented ×1 back to oriented ×3 at most of the time. And she lived out the last bit of her life, about 2 years before she had a stroke at, I think, 90. But she went from, in a matter of a few weeks, from not knowing most of her family members to recognizing everyone and having some decent quality of life to finish off, the end of her life. So BPC, like I was discussing, I had a lady call me a couple days ago, and she was simply like, was giving me some symptoms of, I want to try to prevent dementia. I want to improve my brain function. What are some things I can do? And we talked about hormonal balance. We started BPC with her. I love the BPC. For me, it's kind of my entry level for the brain. There's certainly other things, and we'll probably get to them here in a second, that we can take it up a notch if we need to, depending on what we're trying to treat.
Okay, so BPC. Now what's the difference in between BPC and BPC 157?
I think that's just a difference in marketing, to be honest with you. And so I see it sometimes listed just as BPC, other times as BPC 157.
Okay. All right. So what's the next one we want to talk about that was specifically is really going to impact our brain?
So there's really 4 other peptides that I personally like for the brain. And a lot of times we'll use these. So most of the time I'm using BPC 157. That's for my more standard patient. But then if I have a patient who maybe already has a neurologic disorder, or is just really fearful that from a strong family history that that's what's going to happen with them, we can talk about these other peptides. And cerebral lysin is absolutely one of my favorites. Cerebral lysin is a neuropeptide. It is, it's been shown to significantly improve cognitive function, just overall brain function. It actually is very useful in those patients who have that, executive stress disorder. It's just, I've got a lot on my plate and I can't seem to keep it all straight. It can be used in those cases. It has actually been shown in studies. I think the last one that I found was 2007, but it has been shown to actually decrease the amyloid plaques that, that's what causes Alzheimer's disease in the brain. And in those patients, it actually showed a significant improvement in overall brain function in the Alzheimer's patients. And so it works through a pathway that utilizes a enzyme called glutamine receptor subunit 1. I know say that 10 times, but it's been an amazing product. You can use it IV. You can use it simply as an intramuscular injection. I've actually also used it for musculoskeletal, like out of one of my particular patients had cervical fusion, and she's always got, like, we call them tender points, and I can inject those tender points with cerebral lysin and get like immediate effects with it. And so cerebral lysin is just a fabulous peptide. We wouldn't use it typically. Most of all these that we're talking about, we typically would rotate. We talk about that a lot in our podcast about rotating them in and out. Mm-hmm. So cerebral lysin I typically use on a 30-45 day period, and then come back to it every few months. I typically use it as an intramuscular injection. I personally don't use it as an IV injection, but you certainly can. Physicians can use it as an IV injection.
Okay, so if we're cycling these, and I'm going to say it wrong, cerebral lysin.
Cerebral lysin.
Yeah,
you got close.
So what's the next one that you would cycle in after that?
Well, so there's 2 that are very, very similar, and they're sometimes confused by providers because they're quite similar peptides, and that's Selank and Cmax. And they're both typically used nasally. And so I'm going to talk about Selank first. Kind of where I think about Selank is I think of it as an alternative to benzodiazepines. So your Xanax, your Valiums, Ativans of the world. The great thing about it is it has a benzodiazepine-like effects, but without all the side effects of benzodiazepines. No addiction, no sedation. I've used it in ADHD, anxiety, depression, PTSD. And so it's just, again, all of these kind of have their unique little twist to it. You could use cerebral lysin, and when a person is stable, go to Selank and kind of use Selank as their maintainer. And then when you see some slipping of symptoms, you could always go back with the cerebral lysin, or, hey, it's been 3 or 4 months, let's go back to cerebral lysin. Cmax, like I said, C-Max is one that sometimes, because they're also they both start with an S. They both are very, very similar. They're both used nasally. C-Max is a heptapeptide. Say that 10 times.
That's
Gosh.
easy for you to say.
Yeah. Where I think of C-Max more is circulation issues of the brain. So someone who maybe they did have a stroke at a young age, but maybe a little bit older patient, and they're having issues. They've had a stroke and some sort of an ischemic event. And the sooner you can get this stuff started, from a onset of a stroke, the better symptoms improvement that you can get. So, if one of my patients has a stroke in our setting, if we can get this started as quickly as possible, that's good. But you can also use it in Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's. It again is very, very safe. I typically would not use Selenk and C-Max though at the same time. It would be a rotation. They're just, to me, so similar in nature that I feel like I wouldn't be getting the full bang for the buck out of either one of them by using them at the same time. So I would rotate those. C-Max has also been used in Lou Gehrig's ALS. I know that there's a lot of the ALS providers that use C-Max quite a bit with the ALS patients. That's not my specialty, so I can't really comment on that. But as you and I talked in 2 weeks, actually 2 weeks from today, we head back to Scottsdale for our next increment in Dr. Seed's course. And this course for 2 days is nothing but neurologic disorders. So, I might have some updates in a couple of 2 or 3 weeks on what's new, because that's what these conferences are for, is where we headed with the changes with peptides and what else is out there that we can try with these patients.
So I want to, we've discussed it, but not everybody watches every show. And so this would be a good time to kind of talk about why these are so impactful when they're more signaling components. They're naturally made in the body. We're not talking about medication. We're talking about things that help communicate and tell your body to do more of what it used to resolve. Yeah.
I think it maybe take it even further. And what is a peptide? Peptides are chain amino acids. We have over 7,000 of them naturally occurring in our bodies. Basically, we've been able to isolate these different peptides, figure out what they do, and then use them to help our body function in a better way. And many peptides are bioidentical. Some are synthetic, but we're basically recreating another peptide in the body to do that function. And so it's basically the old theory of we're letting our body heal itself. That's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to give it the tools to heal itself. Ultimately, get those cells communicating better. And actually, Dr. Seeds always says this, and it really hit home with me, is you can really positively affect nearly every disease of the body if you simply have the cells communicating better. There's not an instance that I can think of that's not the case. If the cells are communicating better, things get better. We can't cure everything, but we sure can make people's lives much, much better. I have no doubt in that. So that's basically the theory behind peptides. For the most part, what attracted me to peptides is just how safe they are, because again, we're using things that are in our body already. BPC 157 made in our stomach. Okay. And so thymosin alpha 1, thymosin beta 4 made in our thymus gland in our neck. So, these are products, these are peptides that are already made in our bodies that we're just using more of them to get a effect that we're looking for. So the key for the physician and the patient is just, where do I use these and which ones do I use it and for how long and at what dose? And that's where the training comes in to figure those things out. But if you can have an open patient who's willing to think outside the traditional medicine box, then you can really make some differences with these patients.
One thing that really helped me, so insulin is a peptide. And
Right.
everyone knows that insulin is a peptide. They've been around forever. These have been around since the late 1800s. The Russians were starting to research them, but they're used one of the companies that produces these is in Kentucky. And why is that? Because it's been used in animal health for racing horses. And
Right.
so it's not this new thing. Why is it that it's not more mainstream within the medical community?
Prescribing habits and habits themselves just take a long time to break. And I would nearly bet you that many providers don't realize insulin is a peptide. They just know it as a prescription, a medicine that they prescribe. They haven't really thought about it in depth of it's a peptide because it really doesn't matter for what they're using it for. Many of the diabetic medicines that are out now are peptides. Many of the chemotherapeutic or cancer treating medications are peptides now. Many of the developmental drugs are peptides these days because even Big Pharma has come around on this saying, okay, that probably is the best way to treat the body is by using the body to heal itself. Things that your body are deficient in, let's give it more of. A type 1 diabetic who is deficient in insulin, that's why you give them the peptide of insulin. So, it's pretty simple thoughts. It's just that I hate to say this, but the medical community, at least in America, I think Europe is better at this, is very slow to come around on new ideas. I always joke, but when it actually makes it in the textbooks, we always talk about Harrison's Internal Medicine Guide. By the time it makes it into Harrison's Internal Medicine Guide, it was 20 years ago, and there's something new out. And that's just the way medicine works in America. The good news for providers out there who are thinking about or already are using peptides in their practices is our patients' level of education has never been higher. Patients are looking for new ways, better ways, safer ways to treat themselves. I've always been very perplexed. When I first went into medicine as a medical student, the number one way you treated type 2 diabetes, actually, if you looked at the algorithm, was diet. If you look at it now, that's gone. So basically, the medical community gave up on a diet. They were like, screw it, just go straight to medications. No one ever follows a diet. No one ever gets better. And I guess if you took just a general cross-section of America, that might be true, but that's not true in my practice. I think that a provider listening to this lecture or podcast will say that's not true in my practice either. My patients, when I can show them pre-diabetes, they want to do everything they can to prevent diabetes. They don't want to just go down that path, but it's also up to the provider to be looking for these things sooner, not letting the patient become a full-blown diabetic and be locked into that pathway before we decide to do anything about it. So it's a two-way street. We need the physician, we need the patient working together. We need patients to start thinking about their health before their wheels shoot off. That's the unfortunate aspect when I used to do traditional medicine. The patient would come in when they're already 50 pounds overweight for the last 12 years, and I check their A1C and it's 12, and it's like, crap, you've probably been like this for 5 or 6 years, but the guy didn't want to go to the doctor because he knew ultimately it was going to be bad news. And so it's important that we all start thinking about our mortality, our morbidities, getting those taken care of sooner versus later, putting our head in the sand and just saying it'll get better tomorrow. Although I try that sometimes myself, is not the way we should go with our health.
So the people that are listening to this, they found this because they're researching, they're looking around, they want to take more charge of their health. And so they're going to be more open to several things that can impact the diabetes situation. Intermittent fasting, eating less of the white foods, including vanilla ice cream.
Yeah. Except for cauliflower, you can have it.
And then a little bit of exercise. It doesn't need to be radical, but it just needs to be a little bit. And then talk us through some of the other things, especially the ketone esters. I would like to explore that a little bit more.
So yeah, most people, like when I talk to them, luckily now in my practice, I get patients that are not fully down a pathway of diabetes. They've kind of entered down that road, and their A1C is higher than I would like, but it's not diabetic level, or maybe their fasting blood sugar is elevated. And as I tell them, look, I'm not here to just completely turn over your apple cart. We can still have fun in life. We can still eat a few bad foods here and there, but we're going to have to be much pickier in how we do it. And so I unless they are an insulin using diabetic or a diabetic who's on certain medications, I think everyone else can do intermittent fasting. And it's a hard sell sometimes, but once we convince them and we get them going down that pathway, I think that they feel the positive effects of that. And I know it's very simple and it's not my complete diet plan, but I always say if it's white and you eat it and it's not cauliflower, let's try to limit it in our diet. Bread, rice, pasta, corn, and potatoes. It's pretty simple. I tell patients, it's not that you can't eat those things. Just try to limit it. Don't try to dabble in that food of 5, maybe 2 to 5 times a week, not 2 or 3 times a day. Because most people do. They eat one of those foods every single meal, 3 times a day, 4 times a day. And so then as we get the patient more active, then we try to get them exercising, and then we start trying to talk about doing HIIT exercise, high interval training exercise. I'm a big believer in even if you just did 4 or 5 minutes of HIITs before you do some resistance training, like Maury talked about a couple 2 or 3 weeks ago. And when I say 4 or 5 minutes, so what I mean by that in English is 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, and basically 20 seconds of pure hell. The hardest you can exercise for 20 seconds and then slowing down for 10, 20, 10 for 4 to 5 minutes. Sounds pretty easy until you try and do it. It can be pretty tough. But what that does is that 4 or 5 minutes of HIIT exercise will actually last you 20, 30 minutes. You can, for 5 minutes of exercise, you can get what a lot of people get at the gym for 30 to 45 minutes when they're standing on that treadmill going at 2.5 miles an hour for 45 minutes every day, 5 days a week, and then nothing ever changes for them. When I used to go, we have a gym here now, but I used to go to a traditional gym and I would always see the same people on the same treadmill doing the same workout. And it was all I could do not to go up to them and say, "What are you doing?" But, poor people, you have to really stress the body to get those results. Now that's an extreme version of it, but I think you can get real results with that. Then you throw ketone esters on top of that. As we've talked about, ketone esters, the only real negative of ketone esters is they're not the cheapest and they taste god awful. Ketone aid that makes them doesn't even try to hide that. They basically, I think I told you I'd done some right before we started this podcast, and 5 minutes later, I still had a little bit of that taste hanging with me. But, ketone esters, they really, for performance, they're just amazing. I actually just finished up my blog on it over the weekend. I can't tell my patients enough how much I love ketone esters. They've been such a game changer for me personally and my patients. Really helping. You can see the difference in one workout and what it can do. If you're in the gym 2 or 3, 4 days a week and take ketone esters, I think within a workout or two, you'll see the differences that ketosis, that 3 to 4 hours of ketosis and what it's doing for you. And the fat, again, just like everything works together. What we talk about is just like the intermittent fasting, ketosis. We're trying to make that body use fat for fuel, burn fat. Very few of us don't have some fat that needs to be burned. Okay. And at the same time, the positive effect that ketone esters have on brain function. And that's why I always talk about how I like ketosis in short bursts, but I don't like ketosis continually for weeks on end, because you can deplete that. With ketosis, long-term ketosis or ketogenic diet, you start off athletically performing better. Your brain performs better. You burn more fat. You do good. But then eventually your gut health goes to nothing, and you lose that immunity, and now you're getting sick, and eventually the body basically doesn't want to be in ketosis around the clock for 3 months on end, and people start to get mental fatigue. Their athletic performance starts to go down. And so that's why I think it's just so good to use ketone esters in short doses. Use them. Ketone esters are in short doses. You can use them once, twice. You could even use them 3 times a day, but you're just you putting in that ketosis for very short periods. The other thing I've learned recently with ketone esters, and I haven't tried it yet, but I've read so much about this, is helping you sleep, using a little bit of ketone esters, 5 cc's right before bedtime. The people that have done testimonials on that seem to think it really helps with their sleep. So, ketone esters, they're great. You can only get them from ketoneaid.com. It's not ketone drinks. Don't get confused by that. Not the pyramid ketone drinks. That's not even remotely the same thing.
So all these names and brands and things that we're discussing, I'll put these in the notes in the videos. So if you're just listening to this, there's a video of this, and you can find it on the Resurge Clinic YouTube channel or the ROI Online's YouTube channel. And in the show notes, you can click on all of these things to learn more about them. So I was listening to Dr. Seeds talk about the ketone esters, and it's like he was really jacked up about it. But the way he would say, everything goes back to the cells, like you're saying.
Right. Yeah.
And he says, you're just giving the cells energy. It's a food for the cells that you don't even have to digest. It goes straight to the cells.
Yeah, that's true. That's exactly right. It's he's the one that brought me around, and it took me a little while to get me there, but it's all about cellular communication and giving everything you can to those cells to feed them properly, fuel them properly so that they perform properly. If your cells communicate better, you do better. It's a very simplistic thought, but it is a very true thought. And then when you throw on top of that a little bit of Alka-Seltzer Gold or bicarbonate, sodium bicarbonate, decreasing oxidative stress, decreasing inflammation in the body. Again, these things just all work together. And sometimes my patients have a hard time of picking and choosing what to do. And obviously there's a lot of stuff here. Mm-hmm. I think if a patient says, well, I don't want to spend a ton of money on peptides. Overall, I feel pretty good. Balance your hormones, eat better, lower your carbohydrate intake, intermittent fast. Okay. Eating better and intermittent fasting don't cost you anything. Do Alka-Seltzer Gold, 2 capsules a day in a bottle of water. It costs next to nothing. Okay. Yes. Probably the next one that I recommend, it's ketone esters. Yes, they're not cheap, but when you really look at how much they cost per day, it's not that bad for what they do for you. Then at that point, then you move it up to peptides. And then that's where at that point, most of the time we have to sit down with the patient and say, okay, what's actually going on with you? What are we struggling with? One of the doctors I was listening to the other day on Dr. Seeds actually said, and I thought this was great, and it's something we've gone to in our practice. I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but like, Steve, what's your goals? As a physician, I get so honed in sometime on a person's labs and their scans and this and that I forget to say, Steve, what's important to you? Because it's like with my cosmetic practice. I have learned in my cosmetic practice not to go in and say, well, I see this, this, and this, because, well, that's not why that person's here. They're here because they want this fixed, because when they look in the mirror, they see this. Same way with us. Maybe it is they want to work on their gut, but maybe it's their brain. Maybe it's in the bedroom. What is it that's important to the patient, and am I addressing that properly? And of course, as physicians, as providers, we got to make sure that we're doing the other stuff and not letting them ignore diabetes or something like that. But I just think it's really important that providers really start asking our patients every single visit, what's your goals? Are we accomplishing these goals? And what do we need to do to get to those goals?
What's cool is whatever that goal is, and the audience that does listen to this, they do have goals. They are researching, they are searching, but for you start at the cellular level. And so if for whatever, we're going to be talking about many topics over the next the year every week, but the thing that I really realized is everything circles around the cell and the health of the cell. And so there's a foundational application that you're going to really recommend someone follow, and then start to get more specific based on their labs and their goals.
Yeah, again, I go back to the house. For me, diet, exercise, and hormones is the foundation. And then I like to build the walls with cellular communication. They all kind of go together. And if you fix cellular communication or you make it dramatically better, the cool part is whatever that person's goals are, most likely they're getting closer to reaching them simply because the cells are communicating properly. Then we get to the roof, maybe the drapes, the furniture, that sort of thing. And that's where we start to get real specific on our peptides. Which ones we're choosing for those patients because what are their goals? Maybe it's just, I want to age better. And if so, we've got protocol that we can, do for that. Maybe it's, I just want to burn some more fat. Maybe it's, I want to tan. Maybe it's my sexual function is not as good as it should be. Lord knows we don't just use peptides, but maybe that's where some ozone comes in too with the oxidative stress and inflammation. There's just what's really cool about functional medicine or age management medicine in 2020 and entering 2021 is our options are nearly limitless. And it's just a really cool time to be in medicine right now.
So the folks that are listening to this, they love their doctor generally. You've had, we connect with our doctors, but maybe they're not, they're busy trying to get people taken care of and handling their workload. How do you recommend that they approach or discuss this with their current physician?
Yeah, current physician.
Mm-hmm.
That's always a tough one. Some physicians, hey doc, I was watching this podcast and this doctor and Steve guy were talking about this really cool stuff called peptides.
Mm-hmm.
And, it really just depends on the doctor. I think personally it's up to the physician. If your physician reacts negatively against this, I think you probably have the wrong doctor personally. Luckily, I would say 2 out of 3 times most physicians act, either I have heard about that. That's very interesting. I don't know a lot about it. Maybe you should find a doctor that you can see on the side that can do those types of things. To all the way to, oh my God, that's horrible medicine. And, and you'll get those occasionally, which all that ends up doing is driving the patient further away from them. I'm lucky in my community that finally after, 10 plus years, I believe that the vast majority of my physicians locally like what I do for their patients, because most of the time I'm not stealing their patients from them. I'm actually most of the time doing the stuff that they're not real comfortable doing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making their patients feel better. And then, if they're not a concierge patient, I'm sending them back to them for their blood pressure and these other things. And I become simply another specialist, in the toolbox, which no primary care ever gets upset that the cardiologist is helping them out. And so it just takes a little while for them to realize I'm not trying to steal your patient. And so there's really no great way to talk to your physician other than just talk about it, bring it up, see what your physician's response to it. I was watching a video actually this morning as well about a physician, and they said, how did you get into age management medicine? And she goes, I kept having multiple patients quiz me about stuff I didn't know about because they were finding stuff on the internet. And eventually I said, I guess I need to start looking this stuff up. And that's how their journey started. Or the physician will get to the age themselves where they start looking for things themselves. I mean, we treat a decent amount of physicians here in our practice. And some of my physicians have told me, I used to think what you did was just wacky medicine. And here they are now being treated by me and seeing great results and believing in what we do.
Well, and then obviously, should that physician be open? Should that physician realize when you say, well, insulin is a peptide and you prescribe that, and there are all these other peptides, why can't we consider that? You'd be totally fine with them reaching out to you, correct?
I'm always open to any physician, reaching out to me. That's something that I do on a regular basis. I talk to physicians quite frequently. The cool thing is I used to think when I started doing that I would get these physicians basically calling me angry and, basically accusing me of bad medicine. It's always been exactly the opposite. They're always so intrigued about what we're doing and gosh, you mean there's some other way I can do this? And I've just been probably the highlight of my weeks is always talking to other physicians about what we do. As my wife says, I can talk about this stuff all day long, and talking to other physicians and opening their eyes to this form of medicine, just like happened to me starting 10 years ago, and especially 5 or 6 years ago with peptides. It's a really cool thing. They're always welcome to reach out to me through the website or directly through my email, which is just Dr. Kris with a K at theresurgeclinic.com. More than happy to answer any questions, or at least put them in contact with someone in their area to try to get some education if that's what they would like to do.
All right. I think this has been a really excellent. So just a real quick summary, is when it comes to aging and thinking about your brain fog and how you can be more clear, there are several things that you can do that are super easy, like you just do a little bit of intermittent fasting. Why don't you change the percentage of carbs on your plate to 20% and protein more to 60 to 80%? And then do a little bit of intermittent fasting. I already said that. Maybe some ketone esters.
Some Alka-Seltzer Gold. It's good ways to start. Very inexpensive. Really good results there. And then if that doesn't work, then find either, if you're someone in my area, come see us, or if you're, there's a network of physicians that do things like what we do that they can find in their area. Find someone that does have this skill set that can help you with the issues that you may still be having.
Yeah, and then that BPC 157, that's something that I think there's a lot of gut health that could be impacted by that. And anyway, you should consider it. You can buy it online, especially at the resurgeclinic.com as well. It doesn't need a prescription, and it's just oral dose, right?
Yeah, 2 oral capsules a day. What I tell all my patients is, because we sell a lot of it, is try it for a month. If you don't believe it, if you can't see a difference in a month, then don't buy the second bottle unless you're just using it for pure cell senescence. Most people, I honestly cannot think of a patient that has not told me that within 5 to 10 days they haven't seen some form of improvement either in their gut, musculoskeletal, brain function, something of that nature. It's an amazing peptide. We're so excited that it's over the counter now.
All right. Well, next week we'll be talking about your immune system and what you can do to be prepared for flu season. So be sure to tune in next week at the same time. And Dr. Kris, this was fun. You're like a fun doctor to talk to.
Thanks, Steve. You make it easy.
All right. Then that's a wrap, folks.